We've heard a lot from the previous speakers about the journey that we're on, the phasing, and the role that we all play in that. I'm going to continue that narrative this morning by talking about people and the role that people play in that journey. I'm going to tell a story of two cities. This is a morality tale with two endings. It's a story about power, influence, and action. It's a story that has a few goodies and one or two trolls for good measure. But this isn't a fairy tale. This is a story about our home, Christchurch, our region, Canterbury. So let me start with those trolls. These are not the kind that sit under bridges and gobble the billy goat's gruff. They are the kind that sit at home on their computers. I think Minister Brownlee may have described those people as those who sit around buggerising on Facebook. Sometimes those people are wise, sometimes they are cruel, and sometimes they say things that others won't. They say things like this: the central city is a stark example of a disaster, capitalist inaction and paralysis. A merchant banker-led central government acting in the interests of foreign corporate interests. This government has used its mandated monopoly on the use of force not to help us recover, but to enrich a few select sponsors. To protect itself from accountability, explicitly downgrading our democracy. Other times they say things like this: our children's future is shaped by what is delivered in the CBD. We want to be proud of the outcome. As I walk through the city each day, I get uplifted by some of the exciting developments I can see. Slowly but surely, it is starting to show positive, new life. We have to remain positive. So both of those were recent comments that were left by readers on stories on the press. They represent two different perspectives on the same place. How can they be so different? Anger versus hope, pain versus perseverance. Both of these armchair commentators are viewing the same rebuild, the same process, but they're coming to different conclusions. The first has blamed what he sees as an interventionist government and a helpless public. The second sees hope, but waits. Neither have placed themselves at the centre of the story. Now, this is a situation I hear time and time again, and I think Peter really nailed it when he said, this is up to us. So often I hear people blame them. They haven't done anything for us yet. They are not, insert the problem here. So it's time to stop blaming them and to start influencing where we can. It is time for all of us to put up our hands and to say, this is what I am doing for Christchurch. Whether you are powerful and rich or a humble Kiwi battler, you can all do something for Christchurch. In a moment, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the people who are doing just that. But I've also been asked to speak about some of the challenges, so I'll romp through some of those because I think it's important to acknowledge these before we can move on in their spite. So here are the challenges that are real. The insurance industry and EQC has not always been compassionate enough. It has not always moved fast enough. Both EQC, and Ian will kick me under the table in a minute, and the private insurers have failed some people. Many of those people are still suffering, and this represents a real human rights threat in our community. Our City Council took too long to realise that life post-quake was not business as usual, and this has delayed our recovery. It has slowed tough decisions that are being made now but should have been made 2 years earlier. The Council is now rightly asking the people of Christchurch what trade-offs we are prepared to make. Do we increase income through rates and charges? Do we release capital? Do we cut expenditure? And do we consider which major projects we commit to? Meanwhile, in the past few years, a great deal of focus has gone on the anchor projects. They were always going to be slow, and not enough on creating a regulatory environment that allows 1,000 flowers to bloom. Our leaders are pragmatists. Most of them are really good at their jobs, but they haven't always sold a vision for what we want to be. We know from the mental health experts and the psychosocial experts that a vision is critical to the recovery of a community. We need to know where we are heading, and we need to bravely move towards it. But I don't get cross about those failings. I will continue to advocate for change. My team at the Press will continue to write stories where there are failures until those failures are fixed. But we're also not going to leave it to them, to all of the great people at this table and all of the good people in this room. We're going to do something else. We are going to challenge every person in Christchurch, every person in Canterbury, to put up their hand and say, this is what I am doing for my city. Magnificent or modest, we all have something to contribute. So let me tell you briefly, I've got a bit of time left and I haven't got the standing motion, about a story that we ran in the press earlier this month. I'll read you the introduction. The Christchurch City Council says it could be some time before we can replace a popular Barrington playground targeted by arsonists. The playground next door to Barrington Mall was damaged when it was set alight in the early hours of March 13. The mindless act of violence has upset the local community, with some children reduced to tears by the sight of the charred playground equipment. Now, we had a follow-up to this story just yesterday, and it said this: money has been found for replacement play equipment for Christchurch's arson-hit Barrington Park. An online community fundraising campaign initiated by a local real estate agent and community members has raised $4,600. The Community Trust, Lions, have both pledged $5,000, and the Spraydon Heathcote Community Board has offered $5,000. This, my friends, is what a community response looks like, and my admiration goes to everyone involved. And I also want to acknowledge the really big players who are putting their hand up and saying, this is what I'm doing for Christchurch. The Goffs, the Nick Hunts, the Philip Carters, the Stephen Collins, they are all doing things for their community and making a real commitment to this city. But means does not just spring from money. The city and its future lies in the hands of the entrepreneurs, large and small, and the social creatives who are enabled by a willing bureaucracy. The cafe owners, the community gardeners, the bike share organisers, the artists, the theatre groups, the developers, the small and big businesses, the person who helps maintain forgotten tracks in the Port Hills for others to enjoy, those who help their neighbours, the sports clubs who bring people together. They are all putting their hand up and saying, this is what I am doing for Christchurch. So we want to know what you are doing. What are you doing? And you at the back who are keeping your head down. And you over there, what are you doing for Christchurch? We will facilitate this discussion and this debate, and we will help recognise every person who puts their hands up and says, I have something to contribute. We can all do more to make this a better, cooler place to live. It's been wonderful to hear from our panel of young people this morning about what they are doing. They threw us that challenge, and we must respond to that. Minister Wagner talked about a city of opportunity, and many of our other panellists talked about a vision. The anchor projects will not create vibrancy, though they may support it. The role of Sarah is transitioning, and the city is in its ascendancy. And by city, I mean people. Behind them must sit that engine room of planners and facilitators who focus on modern urbanism, on smart planning, that brings people together, prioritises developments of a human scale. Roads and cycleways that connect rather than divide, mixed-use areas, low-level housing, and a health system that has the home at its heart. And my hat's off to the CDHB for the tremendous work that they've already done in this space. So we have two endings. We have that predicted by the trolls, a state-contrived city of the future, which looks like those of the past, a monument to a transitory ideology. The other ending is a city in which 1,000 flowers bloom, organic, creative, and driven by the people, enabled by a bureaucracy that accepts risk, challenge, and creativity. The best cities were always thus and are always thus. They grew in accordance with local demands and conditions. And sure, things can get chaotic, but with that comes chance and the opportunity of the unexpected. So let me end by asking all of you this. What are you doing for Christchurch?